Hello students, we are going to do KNN algorithm today. I will do implementation of the KNN algorithm. So for that, I do have a data set. This is my data set, mallcustomers.csv. It is a CSV file. It is containing multiple columns, but we will make only two columns out of it. So these two columns, annual income and spending score, that we will use. We will ignore the remaining columns like customer ID, gender and age. These three columns we will ignore. We will take these two columns only for the clustering purpose using K-means algorithm. So let us start with the implementation. This is what my Jupyter notebook. I will give some name to the Jupyter notebook. So I will say K-means algorithm, K-means algo implementation, right? As usual, we will require pandas. So I will say import pandas as PD. Okay, I will import one more file, header file, for changing the present working directory. So we will say that OS, operating system. Then using this OS library, I will say os.change directory, and I will change my directory to this thing, KMeans, where my data set mall_customers.csv is stored, right? So let us change the directory. I will check whether directory is successfully changed or not by giving command present working directory. So now here the directory is changed to KMeans. Now we need to read the data set which is given inside this particular directory. The name of the data set is mallcustomers.csv. So I will copy the name mallcustomers.csv and let us read that data set using pandas library. So I will say pd.read. As the file is CSV file, I will need to use the function read CSV and then provide the name of the CSV file. I will take the entire content into the data frame, and when I will execute this particular command, then the data from this CSV file will be stored inside this data frame df. Let us check whether data is there in the data frame df by printing the first 5 records. If you see, this is my data set which was stored in this small customers.csv file. This is my data set. Okay, so it contains many records, almost 200 records are there. So I told you we are going to make use of annual income and spending score. These two columns we are going to make use of, and let us check. Let us say that suppose X, or we can say that directly. We will try to plot these two things, annual income versus this spending score, and we will see how it looks like in the scatter plot. For that, I will import, we can say that import matplotlib dot pyplot as plt. Okay, and using plt dot scatter, I will plot this annual income versus spending score, right? So I will say df, in that this is what my annual income, and df spending score. So these things I will plot. So X will be annual income, Y will be spending score in that case. And let it be, we will not do any decoration to this plot. We will directly see the plot. So this is what the plot, okay, on X-axis, annual income is there, and on Y-axis, spending score is there. You can give labels over here, plot X label. I can say X label and plot dot Y label. So Y label is, I think, spending score, and X label is, suppose, this thing, annual income. So these two labels we will provide here, right? so that the things will be betterly expressed in this plot. So annual income is there and spending score is there. Now, by observation, we can see that there can be 5 clusters, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 clusters by observation. Okay, let us see how our K-means algorithm will generate or divide these data points into different clusters, right? So for that, I need to import a library for K-means algorithm. So I will say that import sklearn dot, I think cluster is there. From import sklearn dot from sklearn dot cluster. I will say import something K-means. Okay. So now we have imported this library K-means. We will try to build a model. So I will say model K-means. So here, when you are trying to build a model, you need to specify the number of clusters that you want to create from the data set which is provided to us. Here in this case, our data set is in mall.customers, and we are using only 2 columns of that data set, annual income and spending score. So I will say number of clusters, I want 5, because here superficially I can see that there are 5 clusters, right? So model, then I need to fit the model dot fit, and across what we want to fit the model, across these 2 things, annual income and spending score. So I will say for fitting the model, K-means model, I want X parameter, Y is not required. So I will say df. So I want 2 things in that. So first thing is annual income, comma, second thing I want is that is spending score, right? So let us take this thing also. So the second thing is spending score, right? So model is fitted. I will execute this thing, right? So when the model will be fitted, we will get the cluster centers for every cluster. We can get the what we can say that the coordinates of the cluster center for these clusters, 5 clusters, right? So I will say model dot cluster centers. It will give me the values or the coordinates of the cluster centers. So it contains 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 cluster centers, right? So let us take that values into CC. CC will contain the values or the coordinates associated with these 5 cluster centers which are situated in these clusters. Now CC is there. Now let us plot these points of cluster center on this graph, right? So I will copy all that stuff as it is, as we want to plot the graph. So let us take it. Along with that, I want to plot the cluster centers, right? I will say scatter plot, then CC all rows and 0th column, that is X coordinate, CC all rows and first column, okay? And then we will say that here I will use a special marker, that star marker, for showing the cluster center, and we will give color to this cluster center, right? The cluster center star, we will give color as a red color. Let us check it how it looks like. Now look at this thing. These are blue are the points, data points which are present inside the data set. Now this star, as I told you here, right? So these stars are representing the centers of the clusters which we have calculated here, right? These are the cluster centers that we have calculated here using model.cluster centers, right? So we have plotted these cluster centers. So we can say that now the cluster centers, by fitting the model, we got the cluster centers. Now let us check which point resides in which cluster, right? Which point resides in which cluster. So let us try to do that. I will say model dot predict, right? So we need to do prediction now. So we need to provide the values. So these values are given here. I think we have taken it here. So I will copy this thing. Okay. So let us copy it, paste it. Okay. So model dot predict. So all predictions I will collect inside y predict variable. Let us check the values of y predict. So these are the y values of y predict. The first point in this data set, suppose this point, right? This point is residing in cluster number 3. Second point is residing in 1, cluster number 1. So this is what the second point. This is residing in cluster number 1. So likewise, all the points are there inside the data set. These are residing into different clusters, right? Now we will do one thing. I will plot these things, but I will plot the members of cluster 1 into red color, members of cluster 2 into blue color, members of cluster 3 into green color. Likewise, different colors we will use. Okay. By using this thing, we can categorize which points are there, or we can classify which points of the data set are there in which cluster, right? So let us try to do that. I will say cluster center 1's member, right? Or cluster center 0's member, right? Members are in from DF. Those which are those members whose y predict value is equal to 0 from this thing, right? Whose y predict value is 0. So these are cluster center 0's member. Then cluster center 1's member are those whose y predict value is equal to 1. Okay. So these are the points, the data, the coordinates. Second point inside the data set will belong to cluster center, cluster 1, right? So this third point will be in cluster 3, then fourth point will be in cluster 1. Again, this point will be in cluster 3. Likewise, so this point, last point of this data set will be in cluster 2. So similarly, with the help of y predict, we can find out we can get the different data points inside the data set which resides to different clusters, right? So this is the thing that we are doing, right? For third, this will be third, and for last, this will be the fourth. As 5 clusters are there, and the first cluster is 0th cluster, second is first, third is 2, then fourth, and then fifth. Likewise, we have taken the members from that particular, which belongs to that particular cluster. Now we got all these values. Let us plot these values, okay, on the graph. So what we will do, I will say cluster center 0 members. So let us say plot dot scatter, then cc0 underscore members, cc0, this is not executed, so that's why not getting it, cc0 underscore members, right? So in cc0 underscore member, we want to plot something versus something. So we want to plot this annual income versus spending score, right? So I will say annual income, comma cc0 underscore members, and this is what spending score. Let us copy it and paste it here. Okay. So I will say color in this case is suppose blue. I will use blue color for representing the members of cluster 0, right? Then second, I will call it as cluster 1. So this is also cluster 1, and this is color we will use to represent the data points of cluster 1 as a red color, right? So then third, so I will say this is what the members of cluster 2, this cluster 2, and the color that we will use here is green. Okay. For fourth cluster, Let us use color cyan, and this thing will be like cluster 3, and this thing will be third. And for last, blue yellow color we will use. Suppose this color it will be yellow, and we will use this CC4 and CC4. If we plot the graph, our graph will look like this now. So you can easily see that these are the different clusters that has been created using this K-means algorithm for the given data set. So you can go through this code again. I have written the code. So you can say that this is what the implementation of K-means algorithm. In this K-means algorithm, we have formulated 5 clusters by observation, right? Here we have observed the thing. Yeah, how many clusters are there? Generally, we feel that there should be 5 clusters. So based on that, by observation, when we created the model, we said that we want 5 clusters in this particular data set. So that's why I said n clusters. I want n clusters equals to 5, as I want 5 clusters. Okay, by observation, I thought that 5 clusters will be there. So based on that, we have find out the different members from the data set which belongs to different clusters. So this is the implementation of K-means algorithm. I hope that you might have liked it. Thank you for watching the video. Please subscribe to my channel. Thank you.